So, let's talk about something that makes a lot of people uncomfortable, but we really need to talk about it. It's kind of like that one uncle at the family gathering who keeps taking food from your plate when you're not looking. You see him do it, everyone sees him do it, but nobody says anything until all the jollof rice is gone. Today, we're counting down the top 10 most corrupt countries in Africa. Now, when we say corruption, it's not just about a police officer asking for a little lunch money at a traffic stop, although that's definitely part of it. We're talking about the big stuff, the abuse of public office for private gain. Think government officials siphoning off funds meant for schools or hospitals, awarding massive contracts to their unqualified cousins, or just straight up looting the national treasury. It's the kind of systemic problem that holds entire nations back, keeping people in poverty while a select few live like kings. Now, before my comment section blows up with people saying, "Hey, you can't say that about my country," let's be clear. This isn't just my opinion. I didn't just throw darts at a map of Africa, although that does sound like a fun, albeit wildly inaccurate way to do geography. This list is based on hard data, specifically from Transparency International's Corruption Perception Index, or CPI. This index ranks countries by their perceived levels of public sector corruption according to experts and business people. It's a global scorecard, and unfortunately some of our African brothers and sisters are not getting the best grades. It's important to remember this isn't a reflection on the everyday people, who are often the biggest victims of this corruption. The goal here isn't to point fingers and shame anyone. It's about understanding the scale of the problem so we can start talking about solutions. Because corruption isn't just some abstract concept, it has real-world consequences. It means a child can't get an education because the money for their school was stolen. It means a sick person can't get medicine because the hospital budget vanished into thin air. It's a cancer that eats away at the very fabric of society, destroying trust and hindering progress. So, let's pull back the curtain, take a deep breath, and dive into this very serious, very important, and, let's be honest, very frustrating topic. Kicking off our list at number 1, a position nobody wants, is Somalia. For years, this nation in the Horn of Africa has been the poster child for state failure, and unfortunately, its ranking on the corruption index reflects that reality. According to the latest reports from Transparency International, Somalia consistently finds itself at the very bottom of the global list. Not just the African one. It's like being the last kid picked for dodgeball, but every single year, and the game is running a functional government. The decades of civil war and instability have created a perfect storm where public institutions are incredibly weak, and the rule of law is, to put it mildly, more of a suggestion than a rule. In this environment, corruption isn't just an issue, it's the system. From diverting international aid that's meant to feed starving people to public officials, demanding bribes for basic services, the problem is deeply embedded. Imagine trying to build a house on a foundation of quicksand. That's what trying to build a stable, transparent government in Somalia is like. The security situation is so fragile that accountability is almost impossible. When you're more worried about extremist groups than about filing your expense reports correctly, it's easy to see how billions of dollars can just disappear. The people of Somalia are resilient and incredible, but they are being failed by a system that has been broken for far too long. Coming in at number 2 is the world's youngest country, South Sudan. You would hope that a new nation would be a chance for a fresh start, a clean slate. But sadly, it seems South Sudan inherited some of the worst habits from its predecessors. Since gaining independence in 2011, the country has been plagued by civil war and political infighting, which has created a playground for corruption. The government's transparency is practically non-existent. We're talking about a level of secrecy that makes the CIA look like a bunch of gossiping aunties. Vast sums of money, particularly from the nation's rich oil reserves, have been systematically siphoned off by a small political elite. This isn't just about a few bad apples, it's about the entire orchard being rotten. Reports from the UN and other watchdog groups have detailed how top officials have used their positions to amass incredible fortunes, while the majority of the population faces extreme poverty and humanitarian crises. Funds that should be going towards building schools, hospitals, and infrastructure are instead used to buy luxury villas in other countries and to fund the ongoing conflict. It's a tragic cycle. The oil money fuels the war creates instability, and the instability allows for more corruption. it's a heartbreaking betrayal of the hope and optimism that came with independence. Just next door to South Sudan, we have its northern neighbor, Sudan, sitting at number 3. You can't talk about corruption in Sudan without looking at its long and troubled history. For decades, under the rule of Omar al-Bashir, the country was run like a personal piggy bank for the ruling elite. The system was built on patronage and kleptocracy, a fancy word for a government of thieves. Public funds were routinely embezzled, and state-owned enterprises were sold off to cronies for a fraction of their worth. This wasn't just corruption, it was the state-sanctioned looting of an entire nation's wealth, and it left deep, deep scars on society. Even after the 2019 revolution that ousted al-Bashir, the deep-rooted networks of corruption have been incredibly difficult to dismantle. The transition to a democratic government has been rocky, to say the least, and the recent conflict has only made things worse. The military and various factions are now fighting for control, and in that chaos, accountability goes out the window. The country's gold resources, for example, are a major source of illicit income for armed groups. So while the people of Sudan are crying out for change and a better future, the very structures of power are still designed to enrich a few at the expense of the many. It's a powerful reminder that getting rid of a dictator is one thing, but getting rid of the corrupt system he built is a whole other battle. Our number 4 spot takes us to a small country on the west coast of Africa with a very big problem, Equatorial Guinea. Now this place is a classic example of the resource curse. The country is one of Africa's top oil producers, which should make it incredibly wealthy. And technically it is. It has one of the highest GDP per capita ratios on the continent. But here's the catch. Almost none of that money ever reaches the average citizen. Instead, the nation's wealth is concentrated in the hands of the ruling family, who have been in power for over 40 years. It's less of a government and more of a family business, where the main product is oil and the main profit goes directly into their pockets. The stories of excess are legendary and frankly absurd. The president's son, who is also the vice president, is famous for his lavish lifestyle. We're talking fleets of supercars, private jets, and a Michael Jackson memorabilia collection worth millions, including the crystal-studded glove. All of this while a huge portion of the population lives in extreme poverty without access to clean water or basic health care. Scandals involving money laundering and embezzlement are routine. When you have a system where power is absolute and accountability is zero, you get Equatorial Guinea, a country where the national treasury is treated like a personal ATM by the first family. At number 5 we have Libya, a country that has been in a state of turmoil for over a decade. Since the fall of Muammar Gaddafi in 2011, the nation has been fractured, with rival governments and countless armed militias all vying for power, and more importantly, for control of the country's immense oil wealth. This persistent instability has created the perfect breeding ground for corruption to thrive on an epic scale. When there's no single stable government to hold accountable, who's watching the cookie jar? The answer is nobody. Or rather, everybody is just grabbing as many cookies as they can. The corruption in Libya is multifaceted and chaotic. It ranges from militias smuggling subsidized fuel and selling it on the black market to officials in rival administrations embezzling funds from state institutions like the Central Bank and the National Oil Corporation. Billions of dollars have simply vanished. It's a free-for-all where public assets are stripped and national wealth is plundered by those with the most guns. This systemic looting not only deprives the Libyan people of the resources they desperately need to rebuild their country, but also actively fuels the ongoing conflict as different factions fight to maintain their access to these illicit revenue streams. Journeying to the heart of the continent, we find our number 6, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, or DRC. The DRC is perhaps the most tragic example of the resource curse on the planet. This vast country is sitting on an estimated $24 trillion worth of untapped mineral deposits. That's trillion with a T. It has cobalt, copper, diamonds, gold, and coltan, the stuff that powers our smartphones. In theory, the DRC should be one of the richest countries in the world. In reality, it's one of the poorest, and corruption is the main reason why. The exploitation of these natural resources is a story of breathtaking bribery and theft. For decades, mining contracts have been sold off in shady backroom deals to international companies for a fraction of their true value, with massive kickbacks going directly to government officials. This is what's known as grand corruption. It's not just a low-level bureaucrat taking a bribe, it's the systematic plundering of the nation's birthright. The wealth generated from the mines flows out of the country or into the pockets of a corrupt elite, while the Congolese people who live on top of this incredible wealth see almost no benefit. They face armed conflict, displacement, and horrific working conditions, all fueled by the global demand for minerals and the greed of their own leaders. At number 7, we have the landlocked nation of Chad. Much like some of the other countries on this list, Chad has significant oil reserves, but that wealth has done little to improve the lives of its citizens. The country has been ruled by a powerful political dynasty for decades, creating a system where power is centralized and accountability is, well, pretty much a foreign concept. The government operates with a severe lack of transparency, making it nearly impossible to track how the nation's oil revenues are being spent. It's like your country has a bank account but only one guy has the PIN, and he's not telling anyone what it is. The public sector in Chad is rife with practices like nepotism and patronage. Government jobs and lucrative contracts are often handed out based on loyalty to the ruling regime rather than on merit. This creates a culture of impunity, where officials feel they can act without fear of consequence. The judicial system is weak and lacks independence, meaning there is little recourse for challenging corrupt practices. As a result, funds meant for public services like education and healthcare are frequently diverted, perpetuating a cycle of poverty and underdevelopment for the majority of the population, while the elite remain firmly entrenched in power. Our number 8 spot goes to Burundi, a small and densely populated country in the Great Rift Valley. Burundi's struggles with corruption are, honestly, deeply tied to its history of political instability and weak state institutions. The public sector is particularly vulnerable. Many citizens report having to pay bribes to access basic public services, whether it's getting a document processed or receiving medical care. This kind of petty corruption might seem small on an individual level, but when it's widespread, it places a huge burden on the poorest members of society and completely erodes public trust in the government. The challenges run deeper than just low-level bribery. Law enforcement and the judiciary, the very institutions that are supposed to fight corruption, are often perceived as being corrupt themselves. This creates a vicious cycle where there is no effective mechanism to hold powerful individuals accountable. A lack of political will to tackle the problem head-on, combined with limited resources and international isolation, has made it incredibly difficult for Burundi to make meaningful progress. For the average Burundian, it creates a climate of resignation and helplessness, where navigating the system requires playing by a set of unwritten, corrupt rules. Sliding into our number 9 position is Angola. For anyone who follows African politics, this should come as no surprise. For decades, Angola was synonymous with the oil curse and honestly staggering levels of corruption, particularly under the long rule of former President José Eduardo dos Santos. As one of Africa's largest oil producers, the country earned hundreds of billions of dollars. But that wealth was systematically plundered by the ruling family and their associates. The former president's daughter, Isabel dos Santos, was once named Africa's richest woman, with a fortune allegedly built through illicit deals and the looting of state assets. It was a kleptocracy of epic proportions. Now, it's important to note that the current government under President João Lourenço has launched a high-profile anti-corruption campaign. They've gone after some of the big fish, including the Dos Santos family, and have been working to recover billions in stolen assets. It's a positive step for sure. However, decades of deeply entrenched corrupt networks are not easy to dismantle. The perception of corruption remains high because the system that allowed it to flourish for so long is still largely in place. Changing the culture of impunity and ensuring that the country's oil wealth finally benefits all Angolans, not just a select few, remains a monumental task. And rounding out our top 10 is Eritrea, a country often referred to as the North Korea of Africa. What makes corruption in Eritrea so difficult to talk about is the government's extreme lack of transparency. The country is one of the most secretive and authoritarian regimes in the world. There is no independent press, no civil society organizations, and no political opposition. The government operates in a complete black box, making it impossible for citizens or the outside world to get a clear picture of what's going on, especially when it comes to state finances. In this environment, accountability is non-existent. The economy is largely controlled by the state and the ruling party, and there are widespread reports of officials using their positions for personal enrichment. For example, the country's indefinite national service program has been described as a form of forced labor that benefits military and party leaders. Because there are no mechanisms to question authority or demand transparency, corruption can operate unchecked, completely in the shadows. It's a stark reminder that corruption doesn't just thrive in chaos, it also thrives in absolute oppressive silence. So, there you have it, a tour through some of the toughest spots on the continent when it comes to corruption. It's a heavy topic, and it's easy to feel discouraged. But here's the thing. Corruption is not an inherent part of African culture, despite what some tired old stereotypes might suggest. It's a systemic problem, a disease that has been allowed to fester in environments of instability, secrecy, and weak governance. The fight against it is nothing less than a fight for Africa's future. Every dollar stolen is a dream denied, a future compromised. Tackling corruption means building a continent where the vast wealth of resources benefits the many, not the few, where a young person's success is determined by their talent and hard work, not by their connections. This isn't just a job for governments or international organizations. Change starts with awareness and the demand for accountability. As citizens of the world, we have a role to play. We can support the brave journalists and activists on the ground who risk their lives to expose wrongdoing. We can demand that our own governments and multinational corporations act transparently and ethically when they do business in Africa. Staying informed is the first step. The more we understand the mechanics of corruption, the better equipped we are to support the initiatives that are working to create a more just and transparent world. The future of Africa is bright and full of potential, but only if we can get this one giant, greedy elephant out of the room. Thank you so much for sticking with me through this important conversation. I know it's not the easiest topic, but it's one we need to have. If you found this video insightful, please give it a thumbs up. It really helps the channel. And for more deep dives into the issues that shape our world, don't forget to like and subscribe for more insightful content.